Hey y'all, welcome back to Fruit Friday. I'm your host Maddie or Yajai in Thai, and today we are talking about the challenging reality of constantly having to say goodbye when you live abroad. But first, this is Fruit Friday, of course, so let's get into our fruit. This week's fruit is mangosteen, and let me just say, if you have not yet been lucky enough to try mangosteen, you are really missing out and you should put it on your list of things to do before you die because this is one of the most incredible fruits I've ever tried. It is so delightfully sweet and refreshing. It shocked me the first time I tried it. One sec. This involves two hands for opening. So this is a mangosteen. It is pure white and it's separated into these little pods or pieces. And fun fact, you can actually know how many pieces are going to be inside based on how many petals are on the flower at the bottom of the fruit. Some of you, if you've traveled in Southeast Asia, may have seen signs at hotels before saying that durian and mangosteen are not allowed. Those two fruits are commonly eaten together because durian is a heating fruit and mangosteen is a cooling fruit, so they complement each other nicely. Durian isn't allowed because it smells bad, and mangosteen isn't allowed because it can easily stain. The skin is very pigmented, and if it's all over your hands, it can stain the sheets, stain the towels, and hotels don't like that, so that's why they're not allowed. Now, mangosteen is a very tropical fruit and one I had never ever heard of when I was living in the US. And the first time I had it, I was actually in Bali on my study abroad program. Our study abroad coordinator had a big basket full of fruit and she started passing out these mangosteens. And one by one, when we all took a bite, I swear our minds were blown. Like I said, it's so sweet. It's delightfully refreshing. I've never ever tasted a fruit with this strong of a flavor before. And you wouldn't expect it coming from something like so small and not very exciting looking, I would say. Usually you would expect a fruit to have a really wild color if it was going to have a strong taste, but this one's just plain white. Anyway, while I was on my study abroad program, at this point I knew that I was going to be moving to Thailand already, and so I was so excited about the thought of being able to eat mangosteen whenever I wanted because I was sure that Thailand would have them too, and I was like, this is going to be my new favorite fruit. So when I moved to Thailand later that same year, you can imagine my disappointment when I found out that mangosteen is an incredibly seasonal fruit and it's only available at certain times of the year. So I was not able to satisfy my mangosteen craving upon initially arriving, but after a couple months, I did see them return to the markets and I was so excited when that happened because, as I said, I loved it. It was going to be one of my new favorite fruits. But the sad thing about mangosteen, like I said, because it is so seasonal, is you have to enjoy it in that short window, and then you gotta say goodbye and wait for it to come around the next time. And that's very fitting for the theme of today, because the same thing happens when you live abroad. You're constantly saying goodbye to people and waiting for the next time you'll get to see them, because even though it's really hard to let go of something you love, it is always, always so rewarding to reunite with them when it's time. So, let's dive into that.
It's Fruit Friday, yeah, let's take a bite. Life's sweet and sour, take it slice by slice. Humor, heart, and wisdom, served just right. Laughing, learning, loving too. Fruit Friday's here with the juice for you.
Now, I actually want to kick off this episode with a Substack article that I found that I think really, really beautifully puts into words a feeling that I have felt for quite a long time. And I could try to articulate it myself, but I just think this writer did such a beautiful job of doing it, so I want to share it with you directly. I'm not going to read you the full article, I've clipped it up a little bit, but this writing is by a woman named Lala Germain, and she's a former finance professional turned world traveler, and I just love the way that she explained this. So I'm going to read it to you, and then we'll talk about it. If you see your family twice a year and they live another 15 years, you have 30 visits left. 30. Not 30 years, not 30 summers or Christmases stretched luxuriously ahead. 30 times. We operate under a gorgeous, dangerous illusion that the people we love exist in infinite supply, that there will always be next year, next visit, next time. But distance has a cost that doesn't show up on a balance sheet. We budget our presence the way I used to assess portfolio risk in banking, vaguely aware that there's exposure, but never quite believing we'll be caught short when it matters most. But time doesn't roll over like unused annual leave. It doesn't accumulate interest. There's no loyalty program for people that you keep meaning to call. The math is merciless, and it doesn't care about your intentions. So I stopped treating time like it was infinite. I booked the flights I'd been meaning to book for 3 months. I scheduled the video calls I'd been pushing to next week. I said yes to the messy, inconvenient visits because convenient rarely matters when you're counting down. And here's what I discovered. When you treat time as the finite resource it actually is, your financial decisions start to shift too. You stop saying, I can't afford it, and start asking, can I afford not to? You realize that the responsible choice isn't always the one that looks best in a spreadsheet. Sometimes it's the plane ticket, the spontaneous weekend, the dinner that costs more than it should but buys you an evening you'll remember when the count runs out. Financial wellness isn't just about growing your net worth, it's about spending your resources, time, money, and energy on what compounds in the ways that matter. You can always make more money. You cannot make more time with the people that you love. So do the math, count the visits, and then, while the numbers still allow it, book the trip, make the call, show up. Because the most expensive thing you'll ever own is the time you didn't spend when you had the chance. Whew. I'm going to tear up. I'm emotional thinking about that. Very powerful words by Lala Germain. Thank you so much for writing that. I doubt she'll see this, but I just wanted to share. You should totally check out her Substack, her social media profiles, if you have a chance. This really hit home for me. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. I want to dive into some of the points that she made. So let's start by talking about the reunions and the goodbyes you experience with the people at home, the people that you're leaving behind when you move abroad. And I think I want to split these into two very distinct categories. I want to talk about the very first time you have a goodbye and a reunion, and then I want to talk about all the times that you say goodbye and hello again after that, because I think there's a very big difference between those two. Because the very first time you're saying goodbye to everyone, you almost always take the reunion for granted. You are leaving with this idea of it's only a few months, it's only a year, of course I'm going to see you again, I'll be back before you know it. And you're so excited about the place that you're going. You're so excited about your destination and your new opportunities and all of the unknown that you haven't experienced yet, that you're not really thinking about everything that you're leaving behind and the possibility that it's not going to be the same when you come back. And that's okay. That's part of the journey. And that's just something that I think everyone has to go through. And actually, this first goodbye, this goodbye with kind of the reunion taken for granted, makes that first reunion that much sweeter. Because when you move abroad and you leave people behind and a place behind, you really, really most strongly feel the absence of them in that first initial stint abroad. Because you have a life that you know their presence and you know their value and how much they mean to you. And then you're heading towards this unknown where you don't really have anything, especially if you're moving alone to a place you've never been for the first time. You're going from like having a strong sense of family or community to having nothing. And so when you arrive in this new place, you really feel the absence of those people. You really feel the emptiness and the gap in your life. And when you come back for the first time, you fill in that hole. You feel like you're being held again. You feel like you're whole again because the thing that you've been missing while you were abroad once again comes back to you. And that reunion feels super sweet, and that reunion is exciting, and it's so heartwarming and special. And it's one that I think you should really, really soak in and appreciate, because it doesn't always feel like that. Because again, when you move abroad for the first time, it's your first time experiencing like really missing these people at home, and it's their first time really experiencing missing you. You know, as much as they leave a gap or a hole in your heart when you leave, like you're also leaving a hole or gap in their heart when you leave as well. And so coming back and reuniting, you're all remembering how things used to be and trying to come back to how things used to be. And I think the first time you come home, you really are able to do that. But as I talked about in previous episodes, sometimes there is, and oftentimes there is, a drift when you move off to a new place, you start hanging out with new people, you experience different parts of the world, and then you evolve and change, and then other people might evolve and change in their own ways, or they might just stay kind of how they are in the space that they exist in, and then there's a drift, there's a gap between you, and you can't always bridge that gap. So as you go through more and more cycles of goodbye, and as you go through more eras of evolution, you know, those reunions don't feel as exciting and as fulfilling as they once did. And so I think when you go through that first cycle of hello and goodbye, soak it in, really enjoy it, because like I said, it's not going to feel like that forever. Because as you establish yourself abroad and as you build your community and your life in a new place, you start to know two different versions of your life. You know this version of your life that eventually becomes very full and fulfilling in this new world, even in the absence of these other people. And so you don't feel that like longing and that hole and that like missing as strongly. And I know that kind of sounds bad, but it's really true. I think you miss people more at home when you first go to a new place because you feel lonely, you feel isolated, you feel unsure about yourself and like what your life is going to become. But as you establish stronger communities, as you make closer friends, you know, the drift happens and you start to feel like less emptiness in your heart. And again, I think that kind of sounds bad, but it just kind of is true, is as you feel more fulfilled in this new place that you've moved to, you feel less of an emptiness and less of something missing when you leave home, and you just start to know your life abroad in a different way. But at the same time, I think as we live abroad for longer, as we are away from home for longer, the goodbyes can get harder and harder each time. At least for me, I think every time that I go home and have to leave again or choose to leave again, I don't have to, but it is a choice that I make, the goodbyes get a little bit heavier because even though I always want to be thinking, I'll see you again, I know in the back of my mind that that just isn't always the case. And I think whenever I do say goodbye, there's always this thought haunting me in the back of my mind of like, what if this is the last time? And it can be the last time in a lot of ways. I mean, it can be the last time as in, what if this is the last time that I feel like this about you or in your presence? You know, this can be in terms of friendships where maybe you were really close friends with someone, but you can feel that drift happening and you know that maybe you're not going to be able to bridge the gap, or you just aren't going to maintain the relationship that you've had forever. And so sometimes you can say goodbye, and in that moment you have to kind of grieve, like, what if this is the last time that we see each other or have this connection with each other? Because next time we see each other, we're just not going to be able to relate in the same way, or we're not going to feel like we fit into the same community. And that is a hard goodbye. Sometimes you're saying goodbye to people with memory loss. When I found out that my grandma was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I knew that she had been struggling with her memory and her dementia. And when the Alzheimer's diagnosis came in, I obviously understood what that meant and understood the progression of the disease, and that eventually she was not going to remember who I was. And while she's still alive and she's still healthy and she still does remember me, I very vividly remember the time that I said goodbye to her, knowing that it would be the last time that I would see her like for who she was. Because now, like I said, she's still alive, she's still healthy, but she's just not herself anymore. She doesn't have the same wit, she doesn't have the personality, she doesn't talk and laugh and, you know, connect with me in the way that she did all of my life growing up. And that's a really hard goodbye to say. And I think really a disorienting one, to say goodbye to a person that like hasn't physically gone anywhere, but is just like no longer the version of themselves that you know and you grew up loving. And yeah, I still remember very vividly. And now, even though I do still see her and reunite with her every time I go home, it's just like it doesn't feel the same. And it feels like in a way I've already lost her, and I've already said goodbye to her. And that's sad. And sometimes you're saying goodbye to people forever. Sometimes, you know, death is a reality. Things happen, sometimes unexpectedly, sometimes expectedly. But when you're living abroad and you're spending these long extended periods away from people, especially people who are aging, people who might be sick, there's a high probability that, you know, a goodbye could be your last one, or at least every goodbye is like ticking down a count on this very, very limited supply of times that you're going to see them again. My grandparents are getting older. I know that every time I see them is, you know, like one goodbye closer to the last one. And although I don't know when the last one will be, I can hazard a guess that I'm counting them on, you know, two hands if I'm lucky, one hand if I'm not. And that's really hard. You know, I went through a season where my dad was in the hospital while I was living abroad, and I was really scared and unsure of what was going to happen. And thankfully he's okay now and everything's fine. But that experience has pushed me to never take opportunities to see him for granted. And now when I go home and when I say goodbye to these people, regardless of who it is, but especially to, you know, like my parents, my grandparents, I find myself squeezing them a little bit tighter and hanging around for just a moment longer, because I really want to take in the moment and the memory. And again, although I'm thinking and hoping, you know, I'll see you again many more times and this won't be the last goodbye, the thought is haunting me in the back of my head. And I'm like, if this is the last time I see you, I want to remember you in this moment. I want to like look you in the eyes and remember your face and like have a good picture in my mind, because if this is the last time I see you, I want to remember it. So yeah, that is something that gets harder, I think, as you live abroad longer. The goodbyes get more challenging, but the reunions also are sweet, and I think they are a lesson in presence, and they teach you, the importance of gratitude. Every time that I go home now after being abroad for so long, I feel like I value the time spent with the people I love so much more, and I don't take it for granted. I know that those opportunities are limited. Like she said in her writing, you don't have 30 years and 30 summers and 30 Christmases. You just have like 30 times, and that's not very much when you do the math. And so yeah, now when I go home and I know these visits are so limited, I really sit with every moment and try to be fully present and just soak in the memory and the connection and the love, because I know I won't have these opportunities forever. And rather than trying to rush through them or think about like the next time we're going to see each other or the next thing that I need to do or the next person I have to connect with, I slow down. I'm present. I'm grateful for the opportunity that I have. And I think that is a really important lesson to learn and a thing to be aware of, because life happens. We don't know what's going to happen. We never know how things can change. And so when we have the opportunities to see our people and to spend quality time with them, we should take advantage of it. And on that note, and similar to how she said in her writing, like, while we still have the time, we should make it happen. Even when it's inconvenient, even when it doesn't necessarily align with our budget, we have to grab these opportunities while we have them. And that is another thing that I think has really been different than what I expected when I moved abroad. I think when I moved to Thailand, my thought was, this is going to be great. I'm so close to everywhere in Southeast Asia. I'm going to be able to travel all the time. I'm going to go on all these trips and go to all these places and see all these new things. And truthfully, I have barely traveled in Southeast Asia, and I've been here for 7 years. I went back to Bali once to visit my study abroad family and go to a wedding there. I've been to Malaysia and Singapore. I stepped a toe into Laos to do a visa run, and I've been to Sri Lanka. But other than that, I really have not traveled much of Southeast Asia at all. I've traveled a bit of Thailand, but most of my money and my free time, my holidays, have been spent going home. Every time I had an opportunity to take an extended period of time off work or had extra money saved up, I bought a plane ticket back to the US. And I'm sure that like, those tickets are not cheap. And if you are planning to move abroad, budgeting for trips home becomes like a very big part of your expenses, your annual expenses. And that's a big thing to work in. And especially if you're moving to a place where you're getting paid a significantly lower salary in comparison to what you could be making in your home country, like finding the money to make those big international trips can not always be the easiest thing. And it's definitely something that I have struggled with, or I found myself in these loops of like, oh, I can't afford it, oh, I should save the money, oh, I should spend it on something else. But as she said in her writing, and as I agree, like, sometimes the financially responsible decision isn't the one that agrees with your budget or isn't the one that agrees with your schedule. Sometimes it's making the most of opportunities while you have them. And for me, one of the things that I always find myself coming back to is this idea of knowing that I definitely won't regret saying yes. I won't regret going, but I might regret not going. And if there's one thing that I know for certain is that I don't want to live my life with these regrets. I don't want to look back and say, I wish I would have said yes to that trip or to that visit or to that opportunity, because as she said in her writing, and as I've always said, and I firmly believe, money will always come back to you. There is always, always, always going to be a way to make more money, but you cannot make more time. You cannot force opportunities to come back when you're ready for them or when you're in a better position to accept them. And so if you can, by whatever means necessary, say yes to a visit, to a trip, to an opportunity that comes your way. Do it while it's in front of you, because you're not going to get all of those opportunities again. And like she said, the most expensive thing you'll ever own is the time that you didn't spend. And having to carry the weight of that and the regret of that is going to be so much heavier and so much more costly over the long term than, spending a little bit more than maybe you should have, or doing the inconvenient thing to make time for the people that you love, because you're not always going to have that opportunity. And so I think that is really important. So now let's shift gears. Let's jump to the flip side, which is all of the reunions and goodbyes that you experience with the people that you meet abroad, because that is also a huge part of life when you move to a new place, when you move to another country, and one that you really have to accept and make peace with and find a way to embrace, because it doesn't get easier, it doesn't stop. And I think that's something a lot of people don't necessarily expect. So I'll start this with a little bit of a story, and I think I've told this story before, so I won't go into extreme detail. When I first moved to Thailand, 4 months after I arrived, we had the whole pandemic thing. We were in lockdown. And while that was kind of scary and unknown and unfortunate for a lot of the world, it was a really great opportunity for me to find friends and build a strong community in Thailand because no one was really able to work. And so we all just had all this free time. And so over the course of that first year that I was in Thailand, I managed to make some really, really, really good friends. And I would say I had 5 people that were really extremely close to me that I was spending every single day with. And we were just getting to know each other really well, having all these opportunities to connect and experience different things together. And I really, really felt like I had this beautiful, strong community. And I was so grateful to have found this in this new country that was so far from home. And I was like, this is amazing. I've got my friends. I feel like I belong here. It was great. And then within 1 month, all 5 of those people left. One of them decided she was moving to Bangkok. Actually, 3 of them decided they were moving to Bangkok. One got a job in Bangkok, and the other was a couple that wanted to move to Bangkok and, see what life was like there. Another one decided to continue on with his travels after they had reopened the borders. And the 5th one had moved to Phuket. And so suddenly, literally, again, it felt like overnight, but in the span of 1 month, I went from having this like really beautiful, close-knit community to back to square one, like back to the day I arrived where I knew no one, because I had poured so much time and effort and love into these relationships. And I was like, yes, this is great. I have this community. I have them, like all these people that I feel really comfortable with. And then they were just gone. I think the first time this happens, it is very jarring. It's very unsettling because when you move to a new place for the first time and you start to make friends and you start to build community, I think we're a little bit naive to the fact that all of these relationships are quote unquote temporary, because when you live abroad, people are transient, and that is just a reality of it. No one stays forever, okay? Or it's very, very rare that you're going to find people that are going to stick around or stick by your side forever. People are always moving. Sometimes it's a colleague, sometimes it's a close friend, sometimes it's your best friend, sometimes it's you. But everyone goes through their own cycles and phases of living abroad, and when your time is up, when it's time to move on, you move on. And that is just the reality of it. And again, that can really hurt, especially if you're losing someone who was very significant in your life, a very close friend that you've made, and they just disappear. It can kind of feel like you're being forced to start over, or your community is being ripped apart and you have to rebuild again, and constantly having to rebuild and reconnect and find new relationships and pour into new relationships can be exhausting. And I think a lot of people, after they experience the initial loss of a close friend because they moved away, they get this idea in their head of, I'm not going to invest my time or energy into a relationship with these people that I meet abroad because they're just going to leave and then I'm going to be back to square one. So it's better that I just, focus on myself, do my own thing. And they kind of build these walls up around them, and they harden their hearts a little bit because they're thinking about these relationships too transactionally. And I'm begging you not to think of a relationship as a transaction, at least not on a one-to-one level, because if you want to have really close friends and meaningful connections with people, you have to risk the heartbreak that inevitably is going to fall on the other side when they move away. And that is not something that you can avoid. That is not something that you can just work around. It's, again, part of the package. It's part of the life when you are living abroad. And I'm begging you not to let this harden your heart. I'm begging you not to let this close you off to relationships, because I think you can have some very, very insanely beautiful connections and meaningful relationships with people, even if they're only for a short time. And there is so much to gain from a relationship, regardless of the length. I think when we get really close with people and when we allow ourselves to open up and truly be known by people and let them have an impact on us, like the impact that they make on our lives and perhaps the impact that we make on their lives, we carry with us and they carry with them through all of the chapters that follow. And even if you're not spending those chapters together, like the things that you picked up during that time, like you can still hold and you can still cherish. And that's one way that I've really made peace with changing relationships and saying goodbye to friends as they move on to their next chapters and their new locations, is like holding on to the pieces of them that exist within me and knowing that they had a positive impact on me, whether or not I get to spend, like the rest of my life or, multiple years in their presence as a friend. And even though people often move away, you never know when they might circle back around into your life. You never know what season they might appear in later in the future. And it's always good to have connections down the road. You never know when those connections are going to benefit you. And I think if you reframe these goodbyes that you're constantly saying and think of it more as like an ever expanding global community, you're going to find that you are much more open to diving into relationships and putting time and energy and effort into relationships, knowing that if you establish a good connection with someone now, there's still going to be someone that you can reach out to and someone you can connect with down the road, even if it's not as frequently as you'd want it to be, even if it's not in the capacity that you imagined it would be. When you establish these good connections and you are a good friend in the moments that you have with someone, like, they're going to remember that down the road. And it's really awesome to know that you have connections with people in different places anywhere you go. Like, it's honestly such a flex, and it's such a cool thing to be able to say that, like, oh, I have a friend in Portugal, I have a friend in the UK, oh, I have friends in Indonesia and in Singapore and in, like, all of these different places. And not everyone can say that, and you shouldn't take that for granted. You should, like, be proud of that you've established that. And if there's one thing that I truly believe, and I'd like to share with you, is that the love that you pour into relationships and friendships and community transcends beyond those people that you are, like, directly giving to. I think the mistake that a lot of people make, again, is thinking, I don't want to put love or time or energy into this relationship because this person's going to leave and then I'm going to be left with nothing. And then we stop ourselves from showing up in our communities, from being good friends, from connecting with people genuinely and authentically and vulnerably, because we're thinking about it too transactionally, at least on a one-to-one basis. We're thinking, I have to put all this energy into them and then they need to return it to me. And that's just not how friendship works. And I know that a lot of people know this and it shouldn't have to be said, but like I said, I think the love transcends, and the more love you put into the world and the more effort and intention you put into the world to build community and create genuine connections, like, the more it will come back to you. And it's not always going to come back to you from that person, but it circles back around. Like, that is the karmic cycle. And even though it's not always a direct exchange or it's not always an instant payoff, it does come back to you. And so if you keep putting yourself out there, you keep being vulnerable, you keep planting your seeds for connection and for community and watering them and watching them grow, like, the love and the friendship and the connection will continue to find you, even when the current friends and the current communities that you have change and grow and split and divide and do all of the things that they're naturally going to do. So keep that in mind, because even though people are always moving away, there are always new people coming in, there are always new connections to be made. And while this can be challenging and it's hard to get used to this idea of constantly having to say goodbye and hello again and starting over and starting fresh and getting to know people from the beginning, it's worth it. And if you keep your heart open to these new connections, like, you will be amazed at how big and bright your communities can become. And they stretch all over the world. How cool is that? It's amazing. And it's so important because when you move abroad, as we've talked about before, especially if you move alone, you don't have family nearby. You don't have, like, a strong community to lean on in times of trouble. So it's really important to have those groups and those people established. And again, even if it's temporary, even if those relationships don't last forever, like, having your chosen kind of family or community around you is so, so important. And it is something you will never regret, even if the goodbyes are hard, even if it feels like you have to start over again and again. It's important. It's necessary. And so you just got to do it. And on the topic of reunions and goodbyes, the last thing I want to talk about is the reunions and the goodbyes you have with the places that hold these experiences, because I think that can oftentimes be just as hard of a goodbye as saying goodbye to the people. Because as I said, when you move abroad, everyone kind of has their cycles and their timelines and durations of their chapters. And it's different for everyone, but I think oftentimes when you move abroad, there's inevitably a time where you feel like that chapter is coming to a close. You're ready for your next opportunity. You're ready for your next thing. And whether that is moving to a new city or a new country or back to your home, the time will come. It comes for almost everyone, unless you're, planning to move abroad and, like, live somewhere forever, retire there and live out the rest of your life there. Like, you will reach a point in your life where you're like, I'm ready to move on. Like, this chapter, I feel full, I feel satisfied, I've gotten everything I wanted from it, and I want to move to the next place. And that can be a really difficult decision and a really scary decision. One, because if you have stayed in a place long enough and lived there long enough to feel like it's your home and to feel like you belong there, the idea of pulling yourself out of that and starting fresh again from the very beginning like kind of to relate it to the podcast, like back to square one, back to episode one, starting before you're ready and jumping into a whole new unknown world, feeling uncomfortable, feeling lonely, being outside your comfort zone. Like the thought of doing that again is really unsettling. And, even though you've done it already once before and you know that you can do it because now you've established yourself in your communities and found like a beautiful life in a place, when the time comes that you feel like you need to move on to the next thing, you have to start that whole cycle over again. And again, even though you've done it before, even though you've proven to yourself that you can, it doesn't make it any more comfortable. Like it's just as uncomfortable, it's just as challenging. There are just as many barriers and hurdles that you're going to have to jump over again from the beginning. And on the flip side of that, or on the other same side of that, I guess, you have to say goodbye to this place that has become a home to you, that has become part of you, that has had such a significant impact on your life and held you through, whatever chapter it was. I think for me, I don't know that I'll stay in Thailand forever. I don't have a place in mind that I want to go next, but the thought of leaving Thailand is like so heartbreaking to me and so scary because I'm like, I've invested so much here. I love this place so much. It has held me as I transformed into this new version of myself that I love and value. And, I've grown so much since I've been here, and I'm going to talk more about that next week. But yeah, the thought of saying goodbye to Thailand is heartbreaking. And I think one thing that comforts me, as I've transitioned to all online work and I've been doing a lot more traveling and I've been seeing my life a little bit more as, nomadic in a way. Like I have these communities and these pockets and these people all over the world, and being able to bounce between them and be present in all of them is really cool and never something I imagined I'd be able to do. And again, we'll talk more about that next week, but knowing that you can always come back to the place, knowing that it's not going anywhere, that everything that you love about it is still going to be there when you come back is comforting. And as hard as it is to say goodbye to a place that you now maybe consider your home or a part of your home, it's still going to be there, and you can still leave a piece of your heart there, and you can still come back to it when you want. And so when you are saying goodbye to a place, when you are ending a chapter, closing a book on wherever it is that you move to, save your best memories, keep them in your memory book, go back to them, revisit. You can always come back. You can always show people around. I think one of the things that I know that I'll do and I would love to do way down the line in the future is like bring people to Thailand and travel around with them and remind myself and remind them of all the things I love about this place. And again, who knows where I'm going to be. At first, when I moved here, I said I'd be here for a year. After a couple of years, I was like, I'm going to be here forever. Now I've been here 7 years and I'm like, I could move somewhere else, but I don't know where. And so if that's not a lesson in be present, enjoy the moment, I don't know what is, because you never know what you're going to want to do next. You never know what opportunities are going to come your way. And so you just got to go with it. And on that note, I want to wrap up this episode with a little bit of fruit for thought. So my question for you this week is, where in your life do you need to be more present? I think it's very easy for us to get caught up in our routines, in our cycles, in our next, like what do I have to do tomorrow? What's coming next week? What am I going to be doing next month? Where do I need to be then? And what time and where? And we forget to be present in the moment at hand, especially when the moments that we're currently in feel mundane. They don't feel exciting. They don't feel significant in any way. But remember, our time is limited no matter where we are, and whether we're alone or with other people, like we're not going to get those moments back. And so it's really important to slow down and to be present and to appreciate the small things, because even though they're small, even though they're insignificant, even though you might see them every day, eventually you're not going to have them there. If you decide to move to a new place, if this community or this person is no longer part of your life, if you no longer have the ability to do this thing, you're going to look back someday and like wish you could live it all just one more time. And so as much as it is exciting to make plans for the future, to think about what's coming, take some time to be present. Take some time to sit with what you already have and what's right in front of you, and appreciate it and enjoy it and soak it in, because you know that it's temporary. You know you're not going to have it forever. So I want you to think about that this week. Where are you going to be more present? Let me know in the comments. Send me a message. I would love to hear. And don't forget to come back and join me next week, because we're going to be talking about all of the incredibly positive ways my life has changed since moving to Thailand. I think this season has been all about talking about the challenges and the hurdles and the unexpected difficulties that I've faced moving abroad, but I definitely also want to highlight some of the best things, because there have been so many wonderful, wonderful ways that I have grown and transformed, and like things that I've discovered and new pieces of myself that I love since moving to Thailand. And I want to give those their time to shine in the spotlight. So that's what we'll be talking about next time. Thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. If you liked it, please share it with a friend, share it on your social media, follow on Instagram, follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, wherever you're listening. I would love, 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 and appreciate your support. It really helps with engagement more than you know. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here, and enjoy the rest of your day. Happy Friday.
Take one last bite of that juicy slice. Fruit for thought, sounding oh so nice. Human heart of wisdom, served just right. Laughing, learning, loving too. Fruit Friday's here with the juice for you.